Hey everybody, my name's Louie. This is not exactly a continuation of the last energy session. I've been invited here to talk about IEEE Smart Village, and the last speaker, if you look closely, he's actually was wearing a Smart Village t-shirt, and there's a lot of people around wearing Smart Village gear. So what is IEEE Smart Village? That's what I'm going to be talking about today, and let me do a brief introduction of myself and then I'll show you a video and get on with my talk. So I'm Louie. I'm an associate professor at Seattle University, so this is my hometown. You can see that we weren't lying about the rain that we get here, right? It's actually pretty bad. So when you go home, just tell everybody how rainy it is in Seattle, and that way no one else will move here and we'll be able to keep our rent, have affordable housing, yeah. Joe knows what I'm talking about, I'm sure. So I've been involved with IEEE Smart Village pretty much from the very beginning. I'm on the steering committee of it now. In addition to that, I am a co-founder of a nonprofit organization called Kilowatts for Humanity that also works with IEEE Smart Village. So I'm going to start by showing a video and then I'll get into some of the details. And I hope that you're here because you're interested in Smart Village, you want to know more about it. I'm not going to get into any really technical details of anything in this talk. It's really an overview of who we are. Smart Village does have a booth in the exhibition area, and you can go and pick up information there, and I'll put my contact information at the end in case you want to follow up and maybe get involved in this exciting program. So let me see if I can get the video to work. Oh, I don't know what that did.
It is crazy that the world should be so disparate as this.
Some people may say they're not developed, but really, they have adapted to, in many cases, severe climates and can live there in no way that you or I could survive.
In places like the United States, it's almost magical how electricity works. It's so reliable, it's so inexpensive, and it's available everywhere you go. Just think of the last time you had a power outage at your house and how disruptive that is. A lot of people don't even go to work when they have a power outage. The food in your fridge spoils. You worry about charging your devices. Well, this is the reality for about 1.2 billion people around the world.
You look up in a town of 30,000 people and you see nothing. Black.
If you imagine the scenario where you are injured or you or your wife is having a baby in the middle of the night and you go to a health clinic and there's no electricity there. If you ask the average American to think about what they do after 6 p.m. at night, I mean, that's really when they feel like they live, right? Just imagine if your day ended at 6 o'clock at night. Just imagine. There were some IEEE-wide initiatives that really wanted to see how technology could impact humanity. There were some really dedicated volunteers that cropped up from all over the IEEE and even outside IEEE. The IEEE is a member-driven organization, and initiatives like this should be member-volunteer-led.
Smart Village's humanitarian outreach is quite impactful in that we partner with people and then partner with NGOs that they introduce us to in country, and then work with them in order to develop a sustainable business model that provides electricity.
Smart Village is providing electricity through microgrids, through portable battery kits and other business models to people living in these communities.
We are in the business of trying to create commerce and employment and education.
The whole goal is to encourage them to study, to get an education, and then to get good jobs and develop an income.
The model is once we have electricity in a community, we move in with another team that's going to explore the educational opportunities.
There has to be elements of sustainability, and that means training. That means that it is producing money that can keep the entity going. but it also looks at sustainability as in all of the projects are renewable resources.
We're giving a business to a community. We're not just giving them light bulbs.
We have a long vision, we expect results, and we track what we do.
No one else is really providing more than a job, but actually a business for the local entrepreneurs.
We're putting in a company that, in fact, they can own and that they can get regular income from.
The partners that we've directly supported are serving around 15,000 people with clean electricity. The solution is not to just buy more shiny products. The solution is to actually let them build these products, creating those jobs and keeping that money, which would otherwise have gone to paying for kerosene or candles.
Every electrification project that we have has a local partner. That's the entrepreneur, that's the individual or organization that we see promise in. They want to provide access to electricity to improve their communities.
You get to see people when they have electricity for the first time.
I think a lot of lives have been changed on both sides. I mean, a lot of lives have been changed by the people trying to do it.
I think there's a certain dignity that goes along with having electric light.
The bottom line is we need everything from people who are building the technology, open source software to monitor and control these devices, to business people, to legal people, to those that are just passionate about raising the finance, and even more so, those who can be like ambassadors to go out and find those 1 in 1,000 entrepreneurs in those villages.
It doesn't happen on its own. We're really setting up micro-utility enterprises, and they need startup, just like any other business.
We have a current drive to do $10 million fundraising. It makes a gigantic difference in their lives to have that light around.
Teach a person to thrive, and they will thrive.
All right, thanks for watching that. Let's see. Very good. Okay, so let me get on with the details. I think that video captured the spirit of what IEEE Smart Village is trying to do. A little bit of background, we weren't always Smart Village. We started out as Community Solutions Initiative. Of course, that was, there was a popular set of TV shows also going by the name CSI, and there was some confusion with that. So we rebranded to IEEE Smart Village. We are supported by the IEEE Foundation when it comes to fundraising. And if you look at the different countries that we're active in, it's about 8 different countries around the world, and we have about maybe 50,000 people that somehow are being impacted by our partners. The 2 founders are Ray Larson and Robin Podmore, and you saw them in the video. So of course, why we are interested in it is because there's over 1 billion people that don't have regular access to electricity around the world, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Most of those people live in rural areas, although there's quite a few, surprisingly, that live with power lines right over their head and they don't have access themselves. Now, the previous speakers today have talked a lot about electrification statistics, so I'll just go through this briefly. It's not just having access to electricity in your house, it's medical services and schools, you know, those things need to have electricity as well. This is just some statistics of health clinics with electricity in different countries. This is a picture I took in Malawi when I was there over the summer. And this is the medical clinic. If you live in this village and something happens to you, this is where you go. There's no electricity, and God forbid something happens to you at night. If we look at primary school electrification, it's even worse. Virtually 0% of the primary schools in some countries have access to electricity. I spent the last year as a Fulbright scholar in Zambia, and in a village called Chalokwa, I took a picture of this. This is the local school. It's actually a nice school. And I went inside that school and I noticed that they have a computer. There's no power lines, there's no solar panels on this school, but there was a computer. In fact, there were a few computers in this school. So I asked the headmaster, why do you have computers in your school if you don't have electricity? And it was obvious these computers had been collecting dust for years and years and years. And the headmaster said, well, on the government exams, which all students need to take, there's a computer competency course, so they gave us computers. Now, if you go into rural areas, you'll find that just about everywhere you'll find electrical devices. This is a radio, for example, and cell phones are even more ubiquitous. I heard once that there are more cell phones than toothbrushes in India. So think about that, that's quite interesting. So the motivation is clear. There's access to electricity issues. Access to electricity is related to human development and productivity. So Smart Village, the angle that we take on it is really empowering communities through three main things: education, energy, and really entrepreneurship. There's a business component to what happens. This isn't a direct charity. The vision that Smart Village has is quite ambitious. It's to provide electricity to 50 million people by 2025 through partnerships. And partnerships is important. It's a key thing to what we do is forming partnerships. It's not IEEE volunteers going out there and installing solar panels ourselves. That's not what we do. Why do we think that this is a right time to work on electrification? Well, it really comes down to this graph. Okay. On the y-axis, you have willingness to pay, and on the x-axis, think of it as the consumption. And the curve you would expect to look something like this. Okay. People are willing to pay a large amount for a small amount of energy, that energy that they can marshal into its most beneficial purpose. And usually what that purpose is mobile phone charging. If you look at what people pay per kilowatt hour to charge their mobile phone, and you compare it to the rates that I pay in Seattle, they pay about 1,000 times more. Okay, so the most vulnerable people paying 1,000 times the rate per kilowatt hour than I do. And of course, they're willing to do it because mobile phones provide a lot of benefit, a lot of benefit. It's worth it to them. Now, after you meet that need and you start moving down the scale, you generally like to have lighting, maybe some small electronic devices, but they're not willing to pay that same high rate, well, partly because they can't afford it. And as we keep going, you get to the higher energy consumption devices, fans, refrigerators, and so forth, and the willingness to pay a really high rate isn't there. Now, in America, in Europe, and many other countries, we're locked in more or less to a rate of electricity, which is quite low, quite low. We'd actually pretty much disconnect the benefit from electricity from its cost. But in these rural areas, you have an opportunity, actually, to effectively charge more for electricity. And I'm not saying that because I want to make money, but because people are willing to pay extendingly high rates for electricity because of the benefit they get, all of a sudden these technologies that would never work in Seattle make sense. Off-grid solutions, paying for a battery and solar panels, makes sense if people are willing to pay a high rate. So that's one of the reasons why I think this is the right time. Now, I mentioned before, Smart Village, one of its key concepts is this idea of a partner. In fact, maybe some of you in this room want to be a partner and will be a partner of Smart Village someday. Maybe you have an organization that you represent or work with, or you have a village back home that could be a good fit for an electrification project. So the partners vary. Often they are some sort of NGO. They could be for-profit. It could be a social enterprise, or maybe they'll translate through some of these different stages. What IEEE Smart Village really does is provide seed funding to well-qualified partners, money to start up this micro-utility. The expectation, though, isn't just for one village. We want to start up these micro-utilities so that they can be replicated all across that country or region that they operate in. Okay? So it's a way, that's how we scale. Right? We don't want to just do one, we want our partners to do a dozen, 100, as many as they can. It's challenging, but some of them are actually doing it. Now, I've talked about energy, and I've talked about the entrepreneurship part of it. Where does education fit in? Well, I think many of us in this room, I mean, if you're at this conference, you have some development background, I think, and you know that you can't just drop into technology, right? Training, education, that's all important. And so that's another aspect of what IEEE Smart Village does. So here's a quote related to that. So what we do to try to reinforce this education piece is we expect our partners to have some sort of educational element in what they're proposing to do. You know, it can be something at a very, very low level, or it could be perhaps having online classes. IEEE Smart Village has sponsored this global classroom. It's a really cool program that is hosted at Regis University in Denver. And in this classroom, we have learning groups from all over the world, even at villages, working together, learning about development practices. So that's just one facet of where education fits in. I'm going to go into a bit more detail now in energy and entrepreneurship and also education. I talked a bit about why I think this is the right time. Let me be a little more specific on why I think this is the right time for, you've seen all this activity in off-grid electrification. So why is it now? Why didn't we see so much 20 years ago? Well, I think first and perhaps most obviously is that PV prices have plummeted. Not only have the prices gone down, but you can get them everywhere, right? Even in a very rural area, the next biggest town will have somebody selling some PV panels. Now, that's a supply side driver. On the demand side driver, we have LED prices, which have plummeted. LEDs are getting more and more efficient and less expensive. And this is a graph that sort of shows that. LEDs, in my opinion, are the killer app for off-grid electrification, right? Everyone needs lighting. Everyone desires lighting. And the competition isn't very good. Kerosene light is pretty terrible. Candles, also terrible. LED light, it's clean, high quality, doesn't emit soot or smoke. So the fact that we have this service that can be offered, and it's very efficient now, it couples well with solar. And thirdly, I think that mobile communication has proliferated all over the world. It's really easy to connect now. And so that enables a lot of different business models that wouldn't work before. Your meters can talk to the cloud, and you can have remote monitoring of your systems. All these things can make us deliver more effective and reliable service at the end of it. And we're seeing this rapid improvement in solar home systems. You don't need a team of engineering students to get together to cobble together a couple of batteries to make a solar home system. You can go buy them. You can go buy them, and there's a lot of them out there, and their quality is improving immensely. So that gives us a lot of opportunity then to explore business models for these micro utilities. And what we end up seeing is that it's not just one solution. There's a whole host, a whole continuum of solutions that might work, from solar lanterns, solar home systems, energy kiosks, microgrids, mini grids, and at some point, maybe the grid will come. Smart Village is open to these different options, right? Find out what works for the community. Now, previous speakers today have talked about solar home systems and mini grids and microgrids, so I'm not going to get into the details of what they are. If you can read really quickly, I'll treat you to them, okay? But I'm just going to go over them for the sake of time. The idea, though, is that there's a lot of different options, and Smart Village recognizes that. What you really need to do, and what our partners need to do, is they need to talk to the communities that they're going to be engaged in, and decide what they think is the best and most appropriate. The Smart Village Steering Committee, our volunteers, we're not going to decide, how would we know what is best for a local village or community? So it's open to our partners to figure it out. Typically, this is done by conducting surveys, a market survey, a user preference survey, and that sort of thing. You can ask the question about where does commercial off-the-shelf products fit into all of this. like I said, over the last couple of years, we're seeing a lot of maturity, a lot of growth and sophistication in that part. So you can go in most countries and buy an off-the-shelf inverter, PV panels, all that stuff, no problem. There's a supply chain, often a warranty. It's probably the worst thing you can do is just import it yourself from America, because if it fails, what are you going to do? So Smart Villages understands those benefits, but there's also often a need in some situations for product development to happen. And Smart Village does have a tradition of developing products like the Sun Blazer, which you've seen pictures of actually in a couple of earlier presentations, that provide modular solutions to off-grid electrification. The business side of it, I mean, the opportunity is immense. Here are some statistics that were put out by the IEA, but almost 60% of first-time electricity access will be granted through off-grid technology, right? That's amazing when you think about it. It means the grid isn't going to get there. It's probably not going to get there for decades, right? So this is the time to do it. The market is huge. There's more and more private investment and more interest. We're teaching our master's students, our PhD students, in some places our undergraduate students about designing for off-grid electrification. So now you're going to get a workforce that knows these concepts. So the opportunity is immense. You have to be clever. You have to think about who's going to be using that electricity, right? We see cell phone charging, lighting, maybe some televisions. And then you have to be maybe a little more creative. In a couple of projects that I've worked on, we see ice and refrigeration being really important. If the communities by a lake and they're fishermen, they have a really hard time preserving their catch to take it into market to sell. But if you can generate refrigeration and ice there on site, it's worth it to them. They'll buy it. And then you take that money and you pay your employees, you pay for your replacement batteries, the maintenance, and you'll pay for the next microgrid. Cold sodas, you pay a premium, like a 40% premium to have your soda cold in a rural area. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is a sheet that's hung up. Any idea what that sheet is going to be used for?
Movies.
Movies. It's a movie night, right? Amazing. The middle of rural Kenya, movie night, right? Transformative. And you make a little money. The community comes in many ways with our partners. The community can be just as customers. They could be recipients of some of the training. They can be employees. We really like our partners to come up with how that might work. When we talk about different management models that might work with our partners, there's several different ones, and the point of this slide is really just to say that we're not rigid and we understand that different models might work for different places. This slide is just a list of some of them that we've seen to work. Combinations of microgrids and energy kiosks and portable battery kits, and if it's a pay-as-you-go program or if it's a monthly installment, these things are being deployed right now. I mean, there are partners that are doing these types of things that Smart Village works with. So when our partners work with us, we connect them with the other partners, and we will hold a workshop of our partners, and we'll share best practices, and we really are leveraging a lot of that reach of IEEE and getting knowledgeable people together to really do this the right way. I'll quickly go through a couple of examples. The first one is the Sun Blazer. This is I think, Community Solutions Initiative is what we were called then. This is really the first electrification project that was worked on. And it was a custom-made solar trailer that actually was deployed in several locations in Haiti because they had that earthquake that happened 2010, I want to say, something like that. And so these solar trailers were developed and they were installed, and some of them were fabricated in Haiti. And the idea was that inside these solar trailers, there's these portable battery kits. They come with a couple of lights. They're recharged in that solar trailer, and essentially people in the community could rent them out for a fixed fee, and when the battery dies, they come back and get it recharged. So this wasn't really a one-off thing. In fact, they came up with a whole franchise model where you have an operator, an owner, and they would hire out operators in different villages to operate these things. And these operators would find their customers, and there would be a flow of money back up to the overall owner, which would be the partner of Smart Village. So that was one model that worked. In Nigeria, with our partner, Green Village Enterprises, it was different. They made larger scale microgrids, and they ran wires to their customers, and they have meters, and they collect a fee. And this is just an idea, gives you an idea of how that worked. They had, I think it was about 35 to 50 kilowatt systems. They have a couple hundred customers, and they collect a monthly fee based upon consumption. And Ifeanyi, who's the CEO of that company, is replicating it. He's been very successful in Nigeria, and he's impacting thousands of people. More recently, Smart Village has worked with the Global Himalayan Expedition. This is actually really cool. What they do is they take tourists on hikes, treks through the Himalayas. Now, when you're going up there, there's not a lot of good places to stay. There's not a double tree, right, up in the mountains. So they stay with the locals. And there was a challenge because there wasn't any electricity, and the tourists sort of like to have electricity at night. So what Global Himalayan Expedition did is they said, well, maybe we can provide electricity to these areas, these small villages, and they can make it up by charging a higher rent, a higher room rate, if you will, to the tourists. And that's how they pay for the replacement batteries and so forth. This summer, they lit up a whole village here, and you can kind of see the lights at dusk here, and this is the land of the monks. So they've lit up a monastery that had never had electricity. You know, it's a thousands and thousands year old monastery, and here they are watching some television. So that's their business model. That's what they found worked for them. It's not going to work everywhere. Here are some technical details and some quotes about it, but essentially they do small scale DC systems, and they keep it lean, and they are making money, and they are saving money, and it'll go towards the replacement of their parts when they inevitably fail, like everything eventually does. The next slide that I'm going to show you here, this gives you an idea of a cost breakdown for what GHE does. At the bottom right, you'll see that number. It's about 62 cents a kilowatt hour. That's quite high if you think about it in a dollars per kilowatt hour rate, but it works there. Again, people are willing to pay for it because the benefit that they get. They're not complaining about the costs. They're just looking at the benefit, right? And it pencils out. So that's their model, and of course that model doesn't work everywhere. A year ago, Smart Village worked with Lychee Community Solutions and Kilowatts for Humanity, which I'm involved with, to do an energy kiosk, and this was in Filibaba, Zambia. And it's like it's not a huge system. It's about 2 kilowatts, and there's a data logger in there, so we can keep track of the energy production and so forth. If you look at the revenue, again, we always ask, what's the business aspect of it? What they do is they lease out solar home systems to the community. They provide wired electricity service to the neighbors, and they do phone charging and, interestingly, grocery sales. So you actually go inside this kiosk and you see a bunch of groceries that you can buy. This village is about 10 kilometers away from the nearest electrified town, and that's how far you'd have to go if you wanted to get soap or sugar or a toothbrush. But now they can get it locally, so it's amazing. We just audited their books, and they've, in the last year, charged over 1,500 mobile phones. So if you take 1,500 and you multiply that by 10 kilometers, that's about the distance that was saved in travel. It's significant if you think about it. $4,000 of revenue. And then there's some other good heartwarming things, pictures of people having electricity for the first time, a church with an electric keyboard where you can hear their music from all over the village. It's just amazing. We tracked the production, and they've produced about 500 kilowatt hours with 0 downtime. I mean, that's quite a feat in and of itself. And then the solar home systems, which becomes an important revenue stream, has been quite successful. In fact, of the 48 that are out there, all of them have made their monthly payments on time, which is actually quite incredible. Normally it's, you're happy at 90%, so 100% so far has been quite good. And there's been some local job creation, which is another, again, part of how Smart Village can impact a community. On the education front, one of the things that has to happen is there has to be an education and training program. You need somebody in that organization, that partner needs to have somebody who understands the electrical system. Not only the electrical system, but the business side, right? Keeping the books, being able to deposit money in a bank account. These things might seem simple to you and I, but for somebody who's grown up in a village without regular access to banks, it takes some training. So there's a lot of that goes on. This isn't a simple and easy process. There's also, like I mentioned a little bit ago, the Posner Center for International Development, which IEEE has this global classroom, and they have classes on development practices, bringing in people from all over the world to share their experiences. And it's quite amazing to go and participate in that. There's these community-based education models where you're able to basically use the connectivity that is now becoming increasingly popular around the world to deliver educational messages over the internet and so forth. So I'm going to wrap it up here. This is the Smart Village's aim, right? Energy. Let's provide energy to the underserved, to that billion people that don't have access to electricity. Let's foster education, right? It's not just energy, and it's not just business. Education is important as well. And at the end of the day, it's empowerment. It's empowerment for many actors. It's empowerment for that partner to go and make a difference. The community having access to electricity, having access to training and education, that's quite empowering. And then I'd also say from the volunteer perspective, it's quite empowering to see that you've had this impact on people that you'll never meet, but to know that at night, their children are reading under an electric light. To know that they don't have to walk 10 kilometers to charge their cell phone. To know that you had a little bit to do with that is quite rewarding. This is the process that we generally follow. I won't go through this. I hope you got excited about listening to this and what Smart Village does. If you're an IEEE member, this is hopefully a point of pride for you. If you're not an IEEE member, you can certainly be involved in Smart Village anyway. We're always looking for good volunteers. As a volunteer, we don't expect you to go and travel to these locations. In fact, we hope you don't have to, right? We want the local partner to handle all the local stuff. You might not have any experience in development, but that's okay. You'll be able to work with us and learn. You can also donate, right? You can make a tax-deductible donation to the IEEE Foundation. Maybe you know somebody who this might resonate with. Somebody with deep pockets, your rich uncle or something, right? Or your employer. Or maybe you are a representative of an organization in sub-Saharan Africa or some other part of the world, and you want to become a partner. There's a whole proposal process, and there's mentorship that is offered. So there's different ways that you can connect with IEEE Smart Village. And you'll see us throughout this conference. Steve Sabia, who's in the back. Steve? There's Steve. He'll be working the Smart Village booth for a lot of this conference, as well as some of the other Smart Village volunteers. So if you want to know more, go and talk to them, or you can contact me. That's my email there at the bottom. You can follow Smart Village on Twitter, and that's our website. I'll end this with some closing acknowledgments, and thanks for your time.
You gonna take some questions?
Sure.
Anybody,
If there's any,
have a question? Questions? Here we go. Louie.
Yeah, just
So what,
yeah.
so far, what's the greatest single impediment to this thing scaling up?
That's a great question. The greatest single impediment. Well, there's challenges in many aspects. One is this is a new model, and there's not a lot of people with expertise on starting up micro utilities. So while we do have some people that know and have expertise in that domain,